Good morning and welcome back to Topics and Tangents here on Gaming with ADHD, where today we are going to be talking with Grand Dalgliesh. And if I destroyed that, Grant, I apologize.
Yeah, you nailed it.
I nailed it. Sweet.
It's a rare thing. Look at the name written there. It looks impossible.
Writing it when we've gone back and forth through email has not been the easiest for me, but
and you just look at it, it looks impossible. You said it right, Dalgliesh. It's actually a lot easier than it looks, right? It's a Scottish name for those of you who are guessing or wondering. But I'm really happy to be here. Brian, I met Brian through Bear. Who? What is the name of that cafe?
Four Color Cafe, which is on an indefinite hiatus. So that'll be interesting. But he does have a lot going on. But regardless, we still got to meet each other. So here we are.
Yeah. This is a nice tangent to develop off of that, and so that's wonderful. That's how the world works. So I'm glad to be here. I got locked in my little office. It's quiet. I got lots of things that I can talk about and answer questions for folks and talk all about the Columbia Games, the company, the different things that we make, and then also just answer questions and have a good time.
Fantastic. All right. Well, folks, before we get started, do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We do try to put out a few videos each week, even though I have been a bit of a slacker as well lately. But this is something that I've actually been looking forward to for, man, it's literally been a few months now since we started trying to put this together. But we're here. So anyhow, let's go ahead and just get into it. So who is Grant? Tell us a little bit about yourself. No, you don't have to dox yourself, but who's Grant?
Well, so I'm a Canadian-born American resident living in a little town called Blaine. It's about as close to the Canadian border as you can get. If I look out my window, I can see Canada. I can see White Rock as a little suburb of Vancouver. That's where I was born and raised. But my mother's American, so I've always been a dual citizen. My father is Scottish, as I kind of alluded to with the last name. So I am half Scottish, half American, all Canadian. Living in the States because it is the land of opportunity, and Columbia Games is a family business. It was founded in Vancouver by my dad in 1972.
Wow.
And I was -3 when that probably not even a gleam in the eye. My dad graduated with a history degree from Simon Fraser University in BC, Vancouver area. And he and his best friend started up a game company. At the time, they called it Gamma 2. And it was sort of renamed into Columbia Games when in 1983, just sort of not for no particular reason other than a little bit of a changing of the guard. My dad stayed on as the main guy, and his original partner went and got a real job. And my dad never had a real job. He had the luxury of running this game company for his whole adult life. Great way to leverage a history degree.
Sure.
And my mother was an attendant, not a flight attendant, but just a different kind of attendant at Vancouver Airport. Solid union job, so that facilitated my dad getting to play and develop the company. And 54 years almost now, 52 years right now.
Yeah.
And Still going strong. Love
Sure.
it. My dad is. I saw him today. You know, we still work together. Both of us have COVID right now.
Oh no.
Can't tell. I'm fine. I'm all better. I had some pretty rough symptoms on Saturday, uh, feverish and achy and stuff. I thought that I was just hurting because I had played ice hockey that night. Um, Saturday was a long day. We had Highland Games, the bagpipes and all that, caber tossing
Sure.
and all that cool stuff in Blaine, and I was there all day. In the evening, I went to play hockey, and we did a 3-hour kind of not quite a game, but scrimmage, and it was awesome. And when I got home, I hurt a lot, and I thought it was just because I'm old now, like.
I was I was to say, at our age, I mean, should we really be playing hockey?
I because if I do, then I can. It's
That's fair. That's very fair.
never stop moving. I've heard said, right? Uh, but yeah, I came home that night fairly late, like 11:30 at night, and it was a bit of a rough night. I didn't sleep very well. I was sweating a lot. I probably had a fever and chills. I didn't know it was that. I thought it was just the aches from working too hard and skating too much. Um, Sunday, I kind of lazed around. And Monday, when I still didn't feel great, but um, I decided to take a test for the vid, and sure enough, positive.
Well,
And now my dad's got it. I don't know if I gave it to him or he gave it to me. But it is what it is. Not my first rodeo. I had it in 2021. And that time was a little more real in the sense like the archetypical vid where I temporarily lost the sense of smell and taste. And
right.
this time I didn't know it was a vid because it felt again like just achy, but maybe a bit like a flu.
Sure.
And I'm all better now. I think I might still be technically positive and in quarantine zone, but I'm fine. So it was really mild.
Best part about working from home is then you can just tell everyone to stay away. I mean,
Yeah.
I would probably do that anyways, but that's a whole separate issue. So, so what was it like growing up, in a game design household? Like, I mean, I've grown up and like I had games, like, and I would even say that I lucked out because I had stuff that was not your, I mean, we had Monopoly and things like that, but we also like, I remember having Dark Tower growing up. I had a bunch of some of those, fun alternative games, I'm going to call it. So getting to grow up in a design house doing that, what was that like?
Oh, certainly very unique, very special. A segue off of Monopoly was we played Monopoly once or twice, but what we played that really is unique on a Monopoly board, my dad created a horse racing game, and it was like a steeplechase. You had to jump over the hotels and
Okay.
go around the board, and I mean, we were little, like I 5, 6 years old, and my sister even younger, and he always was doing that, kind of like inventing games and adapting, editing and changing. The ones that he was making for Columbia Games were a little more advanced than when I was little. So that's why he made up things like Monopoly Steeplechase. But it wasn't later on in life. I got exposed and interested in some of it. That my first stuff actually was the role playing. Harn, we call Harn. It's HarnWorld. You see that on the screen there. That's because Harn is a world. Harn is an island on a world. But HarnWorld is a product kind of line and name describing the entirety of what it is. It's a world to play RPG in system neutral. First published in 1983, and my first experience, I recall specifically in 1987. Um, my name is in one of the early products called the Pilot's Almanac, which was about maritime adventuring. And my dad had tasked me with calculating some statistics about ships, like things like the length was connected to the beam, which is the width of the ship, and figuring out the tonnage and things. And there was a routine for that, a little bit like character sheets for boats. And my name and one of my best friends, Joel Burslam's name, is in the book. That was my first one. And 87, I was 12 years old because I was born in 75. And really kind of never looked back. I came out of high school in 93. And right about then, we decided to move from Canada to the United States. Where basically the market is stronger and we don't have to import and export as much. And I went straight into sort of full-time working with Dad. Did a little bit of college on the side, and about 10 years later, 12 years, 2005, I finally completed a history degree. But that's just sort of like a little icing on the cake, really, because I live in history. Harn is kind of historic, as a fantasy world. It's very grounded in real history, real medieval kind of history, mostly centered in England, kind of for comparison's sake, in terms of time and technology. And my dad is a history guy, a history major, and a history fan. So his most significant contribution to Harn as a product is making it gritty and historical and real. Still got fantasy in it, dragons and elves and dwarves and orcs and magic and things, but they're all kind of blended in together in such a way that the reality is more prevalent. So the fantasy stuff is kind of rare. It's actually there. It's all over the place if you dig in and start reading. But it's postulated so that it's a bit mythical and fantastical, and that was mostly my dad's intention, a desire to make something unique. It's become known as a low fantasy gaming environment. I think that's a decent description, but there's so much room in there for it to be higher fantasy that it's not necessarily 100% accurate. It's just conveyed that way. Magic rare is a term sometimes I prefer to use.
Sure. Yeah, no,
So,
that's one of the interesting things for me as I've read through some of the material, is just seeing how it's been adapted. I remember one of the first conversations that we were having over at the cafe about being able to bring in real world cultures, real world situations, and adapt them to this setting. So it's been, obviously you've been doing this actually, I guess you have been doing this for almost 40 years.
Yeah, time flies. And if I'm lucky, I'll get to do it another 40 years. My dad is 30 years my senior and still doing it. He leaves a lot more of the decisions to me these days, but he's still actively involved and owns the company, really. And we work together most days. and we're a good team. It's family business, so there's some dynamic there. Famous,
Right.
It's just right out of the archetypical. Lots of gnashing of teeth and passion, passionate argument, passionate agreement, passion. But it's a good thing.
Sure, absolutely. So all right, so let's
There's so much to talk about. You don't know where to start, right?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, there is a lot to start. I mean, so like, I mean, you graduate high school and decide to just go straight into this, as opposed to, especially for our age group. I mean, like it was, nope, you graduate high school and you go to college.
Right.
Why, especially with parents who it sounds like they already had degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they push you to go to college? And dad was just like, sure, come keep working with me on this. That's kind of
it's almost the other way around. My parents do both have degrees, and they were supportive of me getting one, but wanted me to. My dad especially wanted me to work with him at the same time. Maybe he thought he'd lose me if I went off full time. I don't know, but it made sense to just double dip. I did the first 2 years in a community college, which is really conducive to working and studying at the same time.
right.
Real people working a lot of evening classes and things. And it just further cemented my love for history. I took a lot of history classes, and I transferred 2 years later to university in Washington in Bellingham, and finished up the history degree. And I took a broad range of things, a lot of Asian history, African. Wrote my 499 undergraduate thesis on the Italo-Ethiopian War of 1935, and it opened my eyes a little broader, even, right, to different parts of history, different things. So I think that was a good thing, a good benefit of it. That by itself led down some tangents. A little later in life, I adopted with my wife a couple of beautiful Ethiopian girls, and I think that might not have ever come to mind if I hadn't studied the history.
Sure.
So funny how that works. But yeah, this little business, my dad's kind of passion business, but really his full-time life. He did the first half of it in Canada. He came down in the United States. All of us came down officially in 1994. And it was a big change. We moved from the big city, Vancouver, to kind of a small town, Blaine, and a little suburb, if you could say that, of Blaine called Custer. Got some acreage, and so ran the business from home effectively. And that was new. Like when I was growing up, Dad had an office at a different place in Vancouver, and we went to it quite a bit, actually. I remember doing that after school, and it was not too far away. We could ride bikes there, and moved around even, but it was always pretty close. And it was a bit of a change to have it in the home in the mid 90s in the States. Not too long after that, I moved out of that home and got my own home. So then I was kind of going back to work almost in the way my dad had done it at his house. But big change, because I went from a kind of a big city boy to small town, and I don't regret that at all. It's a nice balance, actually. The big city, Vancouver, is right there. So
Sure.
when I want to go see a hockey game or some theater or something or a concert, I can go to the big city, and when I don't have to deal with the traffic and the people and all that. It's kind of I think, a pretty good balance. And where I'm at right now in Blaine, my own house, um, I'm like 500 feet from the ocean, and it's pretty nice to be in the kind of maritime small town environment, and get to go to the city when I want, get to go to work, and also when I want. It's interesting how that works. You get the benefit of the flexible schedule. Like if I want to take a day off or go on a trip or something, I can do it. But then you effectively have to make it up in that the workload, just keeps on mounting. And it's got to be a lot, and for a lot of reasons. We got a lot of products. There's a lot of stuff for this little company that's really me and my dad and a few other people who help that aren't living in our shop. Lately, my wife's been heavily involved, and my mom did a lot of work over the years too. And we have excellent writers.
Are your daughters involved at all, or?
Oh, one of them, my youngest daughter, is doing some work even today. She was over. She does a little packaging and a little shipping, and it's pretty cool. My older one is too busy. She's in school. Both of them are in school as well. The younger one at the university, working on his psychology and women's studies. And she has a bit of time, and she's almost finished school, so she's been involved. I think really it's been a big benefit to her to be able to have that flexibility, so she could put school first, and then earn a little money on the side and help out dad and grandpa. She's 22 now, the younger of the two adopted ones. The older one is 28 now, and we adopted her when she was 10, and that was 2005. And I think, yeah. And she is also in school at the tech college, learning some of the prerequisites for dental hygienist career, and she's already actively working as a hygienist assistant in Bellingham. She loves that. She doesn't have enough time to work with me in the games, but she helps me out in a lot of other ways. One of the more notable ones is there's a third child here in the equation. My original firstborn, a son who was born in 2001, and he's 22 now, going on, 23 in November. And he's nonverbal autism is the diagnosis, and he's got some challenges. With autism comes a high level of anxiety, and he also has seizures, which are kind of horrible, but we're used to them. So, and my oldest daughter helps a lot with him. He's living in another house that is my house. I got it specifically with the idea that he would live there. It's just a half a mile away. And my oldest daughter lives there too, at least sometimes, and helps take care of him on payroll. And so, we're all helping in that sense. It's a big family. Some are helping directly with the games. And then my oldest one, her name is Bethlehem. It's just priceless. Love that, and she's helping in that sense, which sort of frees me up and makes it possible for me to keep doing what I want to do. It's really great. The younger one is named Simone, and my son his name is Cort, C-O-R-T. We're a real happy family, and my daughters are no one's living in the house anymore. In the one I'm sitting in, we got the empty nest. My wife Jennifer and I love that. They're still around, they help me and I help them. It's still a pretty symbiotic relationship. But
I've got 3 of my own, and I absolutely understand what you mean, where it's like they're out, but they keep coming back. So, but that is one of the cool things about being able to do this kind of work, being able to work from home, and either have the family involved or at least kind of tangential. So, especially growing up in that situation. So that was a fun diversion just to hear about your family and what they've done. I should have been better about getting my kids involved with my gaming. They're not horrible, but it's not.
Well,
sometimes they look at.
Yeah, you just can't force it. It has to be organic. And my girls, they like some of our games. We have a kind of a regular people game, shall we say, called The Last Spike, a train game. The girls like that. They have a lot of fun playing that with me or anyone. But the military ones, they haven't got the military bug that I got. And the history, just maybe later in life a little, we'll see. But, it is a male-dominated hobby, at least, especially the military part of it.
Right.
There's a fair number of women involved in fantasy role-playing. But that's still, pretty high percentage male. In war games, it's 99.9%.
Oh yeah, I picked up because I didn't technically Wizard Kings I would say is my second game in the category. After you sent it to me, but I didn't have any of those old school 70s 80s hex and counter type games. And I was digging around and I saw Vietnam, and I'm like, you know what? I don't have anything in that area. All those games are usually World War II. I'm going to get this. And my wife just looks at me. She's like, nope, not even touching it. So,
well, it's not just the male-female thing. It's also gamer, non-gamer. And a lot of my friends won't touch them. Regular.
Oh,
people.
Yeah.
They look at it like it's work. Work to it's not playing, it's work. No, man, you're nuts. It's epic. It's fun. It's healthy stress.
It's 100 hours of trying to recreate and change history.
Yeah, changing history is actually a big part of it. I think it's a very compelling argument for why historical games have merit. Is they sort of expose you and help you think about why certain history happened the way it happened. Where in school you read about what did happen, and a lot of dates and names and facts. The actual why is hardly touched on, and the alternatives, what might have happened, is even less touched on. And gaming is really good about exposing you to that kind of thinking. Today's D-Day, right? June 6th. And, there are games about D-Day, the Normandy invasion of 1944, right?
Right.
That it doesn't always go the way it did. Where sometimes you try to land your landing craft and your armies, and you get beaten. And a good game shows how that can actually happen. Um, so to me, it's one of the best reasons for having historical games. And uh, so you got on your screen in the background there, Wizard Kings. Wizard Kings is a non-historical game in that it's fantasy. It's subject with elves and dwarves and all kinds of things, undead and fun stuff like that. But it's very interesting how it came about. And it was published in the year 2000, and it's a block game. So for most of you probably hearing this for the first time, meeting me for the first time, won't know what a block game is. It's a subgenre of war games. And you mentioned earlier in 1970s Hex and Counter. Hex and Counter might be the other major genre of war games these days. Block game refers to the pieces that, like the soldiers. So there's a little image there. Yeah, Brian's brought up a wonderful image that shows some blocks in the lower middle. And yeah, so wow, nice, full size. So those are what blocks look like, and those are from Wizard Kings. So the top one there is an Amazon and a dwarf and an undead, and then there's a barbarian, an elf, a feudal human one, and the orange one in the corner is orc. And a block is a physical piece of wood. In Wizard Kings, the blocks are about an inch by an inch by half an inch deep, right? So like half of a cube. And they stand on their edge, just like in the picture there. And there's two really unique aspects that blocks kind of add to gaming. The first one we call Fog of War. And so when you're playing the game, where I'm sitting, where the audience, the viewer is sitting right now, would be as if you're looking at your own pieces. If you were actually playing the game, you would see your own pieces, but your opponent or opponents, their pieces would be spun around and facing them. And the back side of the block is just the color, just a blank face.
So sort of like Stratego.
Absolutely. Perfect analogy. Everyone knows Stratego. It's a beautiful analogy to understand what block games are. And the image on the front is a sticker. So when you buy a block game, it comes with blocks and the stickers that you apply yourself, and then you've now customized it into being the block game that it is. And on the other side, though, is a blank face. And so we call that Fog of War. As you're playing kind of blind. You don't know what your enemy has, and you have to send out exploratory forces, and you find out when you get into battle. That's when pieces are tipped forward together to reveal what they are, and dice are used to resolve combat. The second really notable thing about a block game is the way the block has four sides to it. So yeah, when you go around it like that, exactly. The in this game, the name of the unit at the top, like it says Barbarian or Huskarl, I think it says on that one. Yeah, zoom, there you go. And so the name represents strength 1. In some games, we actually use the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 around the outside. In others, these diamonds, which are the same thing, really, functionally. And the Huskarl doesn't have a 4 on its right-hand side, whereas that Amazon or the Orc there does. So that means the Huskarl maxes out at 3. 1 is the name, and the orientation that it's at is the current strength. So all those pieces in that image are effectively at minimum strength 1. Strength 1 block rolls 1 die. Can get 1 hit, or it might miss. If it was oriented where the 2 dots or a number 2 were at the top, that would roll 2 dice. And it's also like hit points in that if you have a 2 strength block and it takes a hit, you rotate it downward to 1. And then vice versa, when you invest gold or resources, production points, whatever the right game mechanic is, they turn clockwise to go up. So clockwise up, counterclockwise down, and the number of dice then therefore is dynamic. And that's also like the fog of war is the same thing. You don't know what that block is, and you don't know how strong it is. It could be anywhere from 1 to 4 steps, and it could be anything. And in Wizard Kings, another major variable is in the upper right-hand corner of those pieces. There's a letter number code, like C2, A2, B2. Those are different examples. The letter is like initiative. The A units, A blocks, like that ranger, it's a bowman, an archer. So it kind of goes first, right? Common sense says the archers are going to shoot first. The cavalry, the knight, is the B. It's kind of in the middle. And the hussar is more like an infantry. And so it's a C. And there are sometimes other letters too, like D and lower. And we actually use the same mechanic in quite a few games, whether they're these Wizard Kings blocks or like the legions of Julius Caesar and Pompey. It's sort of the same basic mechanic. The letter tells you when you're going to shoot. The number tells you what you're shooting for. So all 3 of those that I've been talking about have a 2 there. That's because that's pretty average. A lot of blocks have a 2 strength. A very good one is a 3 or a 4, and a kind of a less high quality unit would have just a 1. That's what you're looking for on the dice. So you roll the number of dice according to the orientation, meaning in this example, they all roll one die, and they're all looking for a 2 or less. So you roll 1 die, and a 1 or a 2 is a hit. 3, 4, 5, 6 is a miss. And of course, when you have a 3-step block, like take that knight, flip him upside down or flip him 180 degrees, and he would be rolling 3 dice. Mathematically, when you roll 3 dice looking for 2s, you expect 1 hit. So you can kind of expect the odds to work out. Over time, they do when you roll enough dice. But there's swings. Sometimes you do well, and sometimes you don't. That adds to the excitement of it. And that mechanic, step reduction was the whole thing. So I mentioned earlier fog of war, and step reduction are the 2 mechanics that are what defines a block game. And that whole thing, this is the application of it in the year 2000 in Wizard Kings. It was invented by my dad and his business partner, Lance, and another guy, Steve. They invented it with their first game in 1972. And that game was called Quebec 1759. That's about the battle that took place in Quebec City in 1759. It was a pivotal battle in history. You can go find it if you hunt around there, although Quebec is currently out of stock. And you will find it if you dig around and search and stuff. But I'm about to re-release it, actually, and I'm excited about that. It's going to be a 50th anniversary edition, a little bit late. We should have had it out a couple years ago, but hey, that's life. If you scroll down, actually, Brian, you'll see another kind of good visual of blocks. So, and there we can see some fog of war. The facing in that picture, you'd be the French player, seeing the French pieces for what they are. And over there, It's on the Ile d'Orléans on it's outside of Quebec City. It's where the British forces stationed in the early summer of 1759. And those are blank to us, right? Stratego-like. We don't know what they are. But the British player sitting on the other side of the table, he knows. And in that game, you transport your blocks with the ships. And the British player is the only one who has a real navy in this campaign. Pardon. They transport those blocks over the water and invade. What you're seeing in that image is only a little segment of the map of Quebec. I think if you close it, Brian, you'll see a slightly. There you go. It's kind of a very basic image showing the map, the pieces kind of when they're in the bag there, and the rule set. And that's kind of a middle edition of Quebec, probably in the early 80s. I have in my hand, I can't really show it to you because the green screen hides it, unfortunately.
Just put it in front of your face. There we go.
There we go. I got the green screen on, by the way, because it's cool. I have to talk to you about that map that you're seeing there. Also because my lighting here is crummy. But this is a first edition of Quebec. And it's a collector item for sure. And 1972 release. And it's got an older map. It isn't colorized. But the blocks were in it. And they were pioneered with that game. A few other games came out later over the years. And to this day, where Columbia Games is known for the block games. But in a twist of fate, quite a few other companies have started releasing block games. And I think that's really cool, actually. I mean, it's now a genre. Like if you go to Board Game Geek, like all of us geeks go to Board Game Geek and look up games, you can actually see that block games is like a category. And it's kind of a beautiful homage to my dad and his original creation, that people have adopted it for the main reasons that it has that fog of war and that step production, and then applied it to their own games. And so that's one of the cooler things about it. You saw it applied there in Wizard Kings. We talked extensively there about how that works. But it was pioneered back in 1972. It's still going strong. Right now, in 2024, my dad and I are working on a game called Alliance, and that is a Napoleonic era grand strategic game of the Napoleonic Wars, from anywhere from 1 solitaire to 7 players. It's about to be released. It's actually the pre-production copies at the printer. I'm looking forward to approving that and pulling the trigger on the actual production fairly soon, this early summer. And it's another sort of evolution of block games applied to another part of history, and now multiplayer. That's kind of something that was pioneered a little bit with Wizard Kings and another couple games. The original games were tended to be 2-player, kind of chess-like.
Like a lot of those types of war games. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Real quick, one question I had about Wizard Kings. So I do see on the little background image there that you got top billing on the game design. Was that your first, we'll say, lead on a project, or?
I think it might be just alphabetical order, in that we're both Dalgliesh, and so I think we were pretty much a team on that one. But about that time, and there was a couple years before that, a game entitled Victory, subtitled Blocks of War, Victory Blocks of War, that a lot like Wizard Kings, only a World War II era. Both Victory and Wizard Kings are sometimes called a sandbox game. Sandbox is an expression, you surely know it in gaming, about meaning build your own castle, right? It's allows you to cook up your own scenarios. Whereas Victory in Europe that we're looking at there, the Quebec game that we looked at earlier, Quebec is the scenario, right? It's the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, or the campaign that led to that battle. Victory in Europe is World War II. That's the scenario. That other game that I mentioned a second ago, Victory, and it's on there. It's number 3501, so you'll find it if you scroll down a little further. Yeah. It's first released in 98. The second edition came out in 2018, actually. And it's a sandbox World War II game, meaning you get to build your army the way you want. It's pretty fun. You get a budget. Sometimes the quickest way is like we all gather around the table and we decide everybody's going to start with 20 blocks at random. Other times you can budget it. You can say, all right, you get to invest 75 points and buy what you want from the price list. And then that one also has what you call geomorphic maps. It's difficult to see exactly what you with that, but they that map, that image right there is actually showing, I think, 4 maps. I can see a 1, a 4, a 7, and a 14. Yeah, that's 4, even more. There's an 8 in the corner there. So that's a bunch of maps.
Oh, we got 7B, 14A, 8B. So you probably even have a couple of map sets put together.
Yeah. So the game comes with 4, and then there was a whole bunch of expansions. And they're geomorphic, which is Greek for geo, land, morphic.
Are these the same maps from Wizard Kings?
No, but they're very close. And you actually could play Wizard Kings on these maps. And
I just asked because a lot of these names look like the names from Wizard Kings.
Artistic style is quite similar.
Sure.
And the geomorphic aspect is the same, but they were done a little differently, just in order to capture the theme a little bit. The Wizard Kings ones look a little more artsy.
Well, and especially even like one quote unquote downside of historical games is, you have a map, where, you already have the history of what tactics were used, where, how they maneuvered, things like that. So using a map system like this is really good for this style game, just because it'll let you do something different. Okay, I can come in with P-51s and an infantry division and some naval support, but Europe doesn't look like this. So it does help balance out the game. So I think that's actually pretty cool.
It's wonderful. Like the sandbox concept means that every game will be different, and it's different not just in the forces and the geography, and also this game lends itself quite well to scenario crafting. There's quite a few published scenarios, and then you can easily just keep on inventing your own. It's almost endless. And a scenario is just being a set of forces, an objective, maybe a timeline or a time limit, and sometimes some other creative stuff. And in Wizard Kings, same thing applies, but there's some extra things that make the storytelling perhaps even more immersive. In Wizard Kings, there's gold and treasure chests, and sometimes the idea is to move a caravan of treasure, let's say, from one side of the map to the other, and that's one player's objective, and the other player or other players is to block it or sack it, and that or to rescue the archetypical princess from a castle.
Sure.
There's a million things you can do, and people are really creative. The internet's full of scenarios, and we have a couple of books that we put as free PDFs, and of course there's some in the product itself. But it's endless. It's like a little kit that you can play with, and you'll never really run out of things to do. I don't think the only reason to put it aside, ever really is that you get another game and you want to play that, and there's a limited amount of but these games are all timeless. People are still playing Quebec, and when we do get the new Quebec finished, and I'm working on that. I have to finish Alliance that I talked about before I can really double down on Quebec. But we have made some big progress on that. I have a new map. It's the same map, but it's new artistry. It looks really good. The new Quebec is going to have really high quality production. War games aren't necessarily known for being the highest quality production in the old days, but they've come a long way. The industry and specifically us as well. So Quebec's going to be a top-notch production with a beautiful mounted map, and I'm super excited about it. Was looking at the graphics this morning with an artist who we have actually pretty much one artist who does almost everything. Does the art for the HarnWorld, and he helps me with the war games too. And so we're blessed in that sense. We do have others. You'll see there in the bottom of the Wizard Kings, Chris Muller, who did the cover art and all the pieces for Wizard Kings. He's a little bit famous in the world of comics. Gosh, it's not entering my mind right now. Iron Rain or something. He's a great guy. Cool. I'm blessed to work with him, and we've had many artists over the years, but with this great guy named Richard Lushek right now, lives in Cincinnati, and he's so talented. He can do anything. The style, some of the stuff you've seen here, and just panning through. He did the cover to that Victory in Europe game, the HarnWorld, which is hidden behind me, and the map, though, that you see behind me is something no one has seen before today. No one, except for me and the guy who made it. And it's a poetic style map of Harn, which means it's actually not super accurate. It's deliberately poetic. A fan, Anders Burstyn, and a friend of his, gosh, it'll pop in my head. His name was the two of them worked on this, and they have also made one about our Viking realm, which is called Ivinia, and I haven't released either of them. So what you're seeing here is special privileged debut vision of what the map of Harn in a poetic style looks like. It's emblazoned there with a little bit of artwork, and on the left side, you see heraldic devices, shields with imagery. We call those the heraldic arms of all the major clans of Harn. And that's pretty cool stuff too. Like Harn has a lot of realism built into it. That is actually just one example. All of the important families have heraldic symbols, and
yeah, I remember reading through the core book and just like a whole section just talking about how heraldry works and what it is and why it's important. So, seeing a map like that, I mean, first off, it's a gorgeous piece of art anyways. But being able to see how it integrates with the world, in a little bit different, less, we'll call it less accurate style.
In a minute, I'll switch to the other map from my background, and you guys can compare and see. But before I let that go, I talk a little more, I think, about the interesting things. The heraldry is just one of many examples of kind of how immersive and well thought out Harn is as a place. the book that Brian flashed in his hand there a minute ago was the actual hardcover HarnWorld book. It's the cover that you're seeing also behind the picture there. And that's the 40th anniversary edition, came out last year, 40 years later. So Harn was released in 1983 at first, and still going strong. It's been, it's a product, a world. It's like a gigantic puzzle. The people that are into it, some of them are still into it 40 years later, or many people have been around for a long time. And then it's wonderful when new people discover it. They're often just blown away and rushing to collect it all. Yeah, it's quite immersive and addictive in that sense, because you just want to know what that's about, what's going on. The heraldry there, for example, it's all the major families, but it's not just a picture there. There are the hard details explaining what those symbols mean. When very commonly the history of the clan is sort of told in the heraldry, like when there's a marriage between a couple of clans, they will split the heraldry or even quarter it. And we have books and articles about what that all means. And so, that's all called the arms. Arms actually means the right to bear arms. And that's one of the neatest things about Harn. It's about real history too. The right to bear arms in history and in Harn is a kind of a privileged thing. And we still fight about it today, with the Second Amendment. It wasn't a right of the people prior to United States modern era or Second Amendment kind of thinking. And as we all know, the major argument for it even today is to resist the tyranny of an oppressive government. But in times of yore, there very much was that. And they accomplished their oppression by having the sole right to bear arms. And the heraldic symbol, those are like recognized by authorities, both again in real history and Harnic life. Harn a lot is a lot like history in the present tense. So I can jump back and forth sometimes talking about history and Harn, and it's sort of seamless. But the heraldic symbology is all controlled, regulated, and if you are carrying weapons, you probably better have some heraldry somewhere on your person to sort of demonstrate that you have the right to do so. And interestingly, most people call those things coats of arms. That's the common term for those things. Well, in a technical sense, they're arms, and they're only really coats of arms when you paint them on your coat. A lot of people don't grasp that, but it's how it came about. You put it on your surcoat, and then it's your coat of arms. Otherwise, it's simply your arms, meaning the right to bear arms. And so in Harn, those few families are the nobility, and they're scattered around, and there's books and pictures and information about all of them in terms of their holdings and their history. And it's not too different from like the kings or barons and earls of English history, and that whole dynamic is kind of a big part of Harn. But the heraldry is one of the ways that it comes to life, right? And feels like the present tense, like you're living in the history when you role play on Harn.
And I was wanting to ask. I mean, what is it like? I mean, obviously, there's that. We'll go with your term, the modern history. But after 40 years, what is it that you think keeps people coming back or still getting interested in Harn? I mean, it's when you have that much information, I mean, it's kind of along the lines of like Star Wars with source books and novels and all sorts of things, detailing everything. Harn is a bit of a niche, so why do you think people keep coming back to it?
It's so engaging. You can never know it all, I don't think. Like if you do own all of the stuff and have read it once, you still no way you know it all. It's like a massive encyclopedia set. There's some aspects of it are like academic, like it's just really interesting to know about, and there are not an insignificant amount of people that don't have the luxury right now of playing in an active campaign. They still collect it for the sheer enjoyment of reading it, and we manage to publish new stuff quite often, actually. About every 3 months, we put out a new release. But we never change anything. It's kind of a cardinal rule of the original conception of Harn that the big picture was spelled out pretty completely. The timeline, for example, there's a great deal of history that you can read about. History of Harn, history of the world, the more closer you get to modern Harnic time, the more detail you get, and then also within like a source book, a regional source book. So HarnWorld, the product that you had there, that's the big overview. The top level, have a look at the whole world, the planet. Even it even has things
literally like the whole world, folks.
There's maps of the planets, maps of the plate tectonics. There are star charts, but it also then drills down right to individual castles and settlements, cities, buildings, and individual people. And it's one of its major philosophies is that it's always internally consistent. So when we release something new, a good amount of the work involved in publishing something new is making sure that it's not in violation of what's been said before. And we have a name for that. It's called canon checking, because Harn that is published is called canon. It's kind of a cute term for it, but it's pretty accurate in how we conceive of it. A very, very easy to understand example is the timeline. Harn, when from the beginning, is set in the year 720 in Harnic time. There's a whole calendar with named months and things like that. But the year 720 is the present, and it's been the present from my perspective, or Columbia Games' perspective, since 1983. So we don't ever kick the can forward and tell any meta story about what happens. That's kind of forbidden from our perspective. We would argue that that's your story to tell, the game master, the players, to experience what happens moving forward. And we wouldn't want to contradict it, so we don't do that. We fill it in with more detail, sometimes historical detail, but mostly present day detail. And so a new supplement that comes out on a particular castle, for example, I'm editing right now for the next quarterly release, a castle called Parnham in the Kingdom of Maldarin, and it's it's never been detailed before. The castle, though, has always been there, in the sense that if you look on the map, it's there. If you look in that big book, there is an encyclopedic index, and it's there. There'll be a couple paragraphs about it at most. Now we are writing an entire article about that castle, and as I mentioned, it will not change it. It will just expand on it. And people love that concept because they may have always wanted to go there and we're waiting for the information, or maybe they've been there and they're still interested in seeing what we're going to say about it. But it's pretty neat, yeah. And actually, that's Parnan Castle. That's it. Just to twist it, I'm doing Parnam right above it, the keep. We do have the other one. That's, you can almost tell by the length of the article or the encyclopedic entry there, how many paragraphs there are. Might tell you about whether there's a book about it, as in the case of Parnan. The image, the illustration is also a clue. So you can get that one and read about it. Parnam has not been developed very much until now. But as you can see, the big history there, like when it was built, who holds it, where it is, population, those things were defined in 1983 and will never change. So what we're doing these days is just filling in, adding to, and people people become, passionately invested in it, and they just want to know. Some sort of would say they spend a lot of time there, and I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it,
Yeah.
So that one, and the second of the two articles I'm working on right now, and I literally was reading them this afternoon, is a piece called Thespians as in actors, and it's about the Thespians Guild. So that's another kind of special thing about Harn. There is a guild structure. Guild, in medieval terms, in Earth medieval, is a real thing. Right? Guilds are essentially monopolies, where an organization controls who gets to do which craft in which town. And so there's a whole bunch of them. And the guilds all have history, symbology, information, and that at its broadest level was spelled out in 1983, that like which guilds exist and which even their symbology was established way back then. But now, like kind of for the first time, we're putting out 10 or 12 pages specifically about the Thespian Guild that just adds to it and gives you a little more to go with. Story-wise, it's just sort of guides to how to use this in a playing context. And the whole thing just adds to the depth and richness of the storytelling. So I think that's what Harn is really about. It was system neutral, meaning you can play with any game system you want. And some people play with kind of gritty, like rules heavy systems. We do have one called Harn Master. We can talk about that a bit later. Many play with D&D. Other ones, systems, Fate is a little bit famous for being pretty good. The ones that are more story centered, I think, are even just ideal, because you could play even with no rules, as far as I'm concerned, because it's the story that is immersive and interesting, and you just get more and more and more. And it's addictive. It's amazing. I'm just as addicted to it as the customers are.
I was
Just
gonna say, what's your personal rule set of choice for playing in Harn?
I've done a little of everything, but I do like the one that we developed called Harn Master quite a bit, and it's because it's kind of a natural fit. It it's kind of a gritty and realistic rules system with quite immersive and detailed character generation and skill resolution, combat, and that part of things is very real. It's tactical, with skills for doing things like swinging swords or blocking with shields, um, and results that come from those dice, percentile dice, to resolve a skill test, and then the result of your turn in Harnmaster in a battle is quite detailed and actually story oriented again. Um, I swing my sword, you block. If I manage to out succeed you, um, we're going to see where I hit you. And let's suppose it's your shoulder. Um, my sword comes crashing in on your shoulder, and we'll do some technical stuff where we'll check my sword and your armor and whether there's an actual net penetration where you've got a wound, and it's going to be described like a grievous wound. It could be bleeding, and you're probably going to drop your sword, uh, and maybe pass out. Um, Maybe your arm's coming off. Yeah, and probably you're done fighting, like for the day, for maybe for life. Um, After the battle, you might get an infection. That's very real from history, and Harnmaster covers that. It teaches you to wear armor and carry a shield. It teaches you to run away, if you're outnumbered. It's quite a different experience than subtracting hit points until you're dead. And there's room in the world for both. I don't intend, when I say that, to be too elitist or knocking anything else. That's not my intention at all. It's just it's my preference, and those are the reasons. It's gritty and real. It's combat, for example, very violent, and but it's the story aspect of it that I think is the best, the gain that you get for the little bit of overhead of taking the time to have battles like that. It's also tactical. Like there's actual decisions, right? Like I mentioned, do you block or do you run or do you swing back? And it's interactive. So it's real decisions that really matter for your character's life. So I love that. I mean, it's epic. It's a very clean and elegant system. There's a little bit of overhead. Most of it, though, is kind of pre-calculated in the character generation process, and it works pretty smoothly. And it delivers such an immersive result and story that I kind of think it's worth it. So that's my choice, and a lot of people agree. But maybe statistically, probably a half of the regular Harn folk that collect and love and live on Harn use Harnmaster, and the rest use something else.
Sure.
And I'm okay with all that.
Well, and it's a very different approach, because usually you have the system and the setting kind of baked together. It's not very common that you'll have somebody put out a setting as expansive as this and not intend for it to be one particular rule set. So
Indeed. Yeah. Way back in 83, it didn't have a system. So HarnMaster came about a few years later. In 86, it was first published.
okay.
And so the first 3 years, there was no such thing. And so everybody used D&D or something. There wasn't a lot of choices back then either. D&D, GURPS,
Right.
right? Rollmaster. These are all, that was the original intention. And it might have always stayed that way, except that customers asked for it. Customers heard that we had such a thing, because one of the other important people in the history of Harn is Robin Crosby, kind of the original creator of Harn from Vancouver, who brought it to my dad. And they met at a gaming club in Vancouver. And Robin was the kind of creative genius who first conceived of the world. And my dad and him and a couple of other people worked together to kind of shoehorn it into what it became, that kind of gritty historical self-regulating thing. But Robin actually played with it, and he had a system of his own that he called HarnMaster. And so when people found out that existed, they just asked for it. And so eventually we relented and made it available. And no, we don't look back now. It's a really cool thing. But it's like a fork, like Harn the World, Harn Master are kind of two separate things. And we try to keep them so that you don't have to, if you're not using HarnMaster, you're not really missing much. In the sense that the world is the same. And
sure. So, and I do want to bring this up because I've been sitting on it for a while. I'm just trying to find a good point. Max Liao from Legion of Myth says, Brian gets $10 because I owe Grant an apology. He reached out to me quite some time ago and I unintentionally ghosted him. So he apologizes.
All right.
But,
I accept. Don't worry about it. If you can dig that out and write me back or whatever, I'd love it. And we'll just pick up like we never left off. I switched my background there, you guys. You can see a different map. That's the Harn map that first came out in 1983. That was hand drawn by Robin Crosby, and it's still one of the more amazing maps that's been published in the RPG world, in that it looks like a real map, right? It looks very real. It's accurate in terms of its geography, like the mountains and the rivers, they all make sense. Floodplains and things, it's very real. All of the cities like that, Parnan and Parnham are on that map. And that book, HarnWorld, has an encyclopedic index of every point on that map and a whole bunch more stuff. When that was first done, it was drawn by hand, and the type was done with Letraset, if anyone remembers what that was.
That is before my time.
Yeah, mine too. But nowadays we can do that with computers and we can make it look the same. That took a while because computers have been able to make maps for a while, but they couldn't make them look as good for a long time. But we have made that transition here. And so newer maps coming out are computer generated, but there's still a lot of mechanical and manual thought put into it, both artistically and conceptually. So again, trying to make the world like a real place there's that reality of the history, some of the stuff I touched upon with heraldry and guilds and all that, but there's the reality of like the geography and the structure of the actual world, and a lot of thought goes into that. We have maps that kind of drill down or zoom in from that map that you see there. We also have ones that go the other direction, the zoom out. So Brian briefly flashed a map of the whole world. So like the whole globe has been mapped. This island on Harn, island of Harn, is slightly analogous to Britain. And I mean that, I mentioned earlier, I meant that in the context of history and culture. It's also like geographically, in terms of how it's placed on the globe, it's bigger than England, like 2 or 3 times bigger than England, but it's positioned off of the northwest of a continent that's a lot like Asia, and it's a lot like England. Now, all of that is deliberate. One of Robin Crosby's original philosophies was to help gamers and game masters tell an immersive story by making some things, as many things as possible, kind of naturally familiar. So because Harn is placed where it is, you can know without even reading, although we have information, but you can know what the climate is like. And there is a calendar of Harn, but we put 12 months in it. And the 12 months happen to have 30 days each. That's nice, so you don't have to guess which ones are 31 and 28 and all that. It's 360 in total, so that's close enough to what Earth is. And so that, again, is familiar. A year is a year. A day is 24 hours. There's one moon orbiting around the planet that is Harn. The planet's called Kathira, the moon it's called Yale, and that one moon is pretty Earth-like, and that provides familiarity with things like tides, because as we all know, the tides are controlled by the moon and the sun. But
well, but I mean, there's something to be said for being creative and being unique and doing something different, but then it increases the difficulty of getting somebody interested in getting involved, because, like, let's be honest, if I have to pull out this book and read all of it just to understand what's happening in Harn, how many people are going to do it? Whereas if you say, think about it, in terms of medieval England, and it's located in this area, and it has a similar climate, and then here's this continent, and it's going to have similar climate for that continent. Mm-hmm. It at least gives people that reference point to be able to jump off and start doing more with it.
It's quite useful in that sense. That was one of the philosophies way back. And there's it's been written about in some of our places that you can see the original philosophy. Another one was to balance economics with mayhem. So there's a lot of thought put into the HarnWorld, to the economy of Harn, like trade routes and surpluses of different commodities and stuff. And you can read all about that, but you can also know that it's kind of common sense. So if you read about it, it will confirm the bias you probably already have. And that's another way that it's really adaptable and easy to adopt, either like in total, like you can fully take on Harn, or you can borrow little bits of it and stuff and shoehorn it into your own world or other things. Or you could take some dungeon from some other book, and there's plenty of wilderness places on Harn that you could plop it in, and it would probably just fit just fine. So it's usable, very usable world in that sense. And it was all, again, deliberate, because at the time, there really wasn't anything like it. And I think the Greyhawk world sort of came out around that time period as a place to play. But, prior to that, and it was like a one-off dungeon, right? You went and you ran through the dungeon, and when you were done, you went to another dungeon, but there was no clarity about how you got from one dungeon to the other. and no mega story, right? So
Right.
there was a demand for that for sure, and Harn was crafted and created to meet that demand, and yeah, and it was popular right away. Its heyday, really, honestly, it was bigger when it first came out. Since then, there's more competition in the field, so it's harder to get attention. And a lot of people still don't know about Harn, but it
Even
was
I'm relatively new.
yeah, right, but it was pretty big right out of the gate, and so that was good in the sense that it was a commercial success, and we were able um, to expand it quite quickly and get kind of a core amount of information out that became the canon pretty quickly, and that way the framework was established.
Sure. So one thing you mentioned is like the ability with Harn to be able to drill down into locations and places and peoples. Is there anything to say drill down into the story of Harn? If
Well,
you get where I'm going with this. You mentioned it.
yeah, the story of certain individuals is told in context always. So again, like big picture history, big picture present day was told very early on. So like there's a realm in the center of Harn, like right behind my head there, called Caldor, right over my right shoulder. And Caldor, you can buy a book about Caldor. That's the book. The original Harn, the first thing that came out, certainly defined Caldor and the history broadly of it, and who's king and who's the various earls, and then the later books just flesh that out. Story wise, it's just dripping with story. So a couple reasons. The first is we don't move the time clock forward, right? So the story it's frozen in time at 720. I know I mentioned that earlier. The point of that is there's all this build up to what's to the now, and all these things that are just about to happen or are actively happening, and then you can sort of join the story. Caldor is very iconic. I often introduce people to this concept by telling them about Caldor because it's kind of easy to understand. It's kind of your classic feudal realm with a king who's kind of not the strongest, not the weakest, but there's a peerage, earls and barons, and some of them are quite powerful and strong, and they're all sort of jostling or vying for position. The king himself, and his name is Miganath, and he's an older guy. He's sickly. He's supposed to be dead, according to anyone who has a stake in it. And he, for a decade or more, has sort of surprised everyone by just getting up every morning. But he does not have a clear heir. He has 3 sons, but they're all illegitimate. They're all from 3 different women, and they are all powerful people in their own regard. One of them is a sheriff who controls one of the important castles, and the others are important too. They all have a sort of a claim to the throne, but it's not watertight. And the king also has some other relatives, cousins and sisters, and then there's some other people that have decent claims. That some of them go back to like the previous dynasty and claim it based on that. There's a section in that Caldor book which was really fleshed out in the kind of modern version of Caldor, but was always at least loosely conveyed, outlining the succession crisis that's going to happen when this king dies. And again, we don't tell you when. It happens when you want it to happen as players and game masters, but it's been gamed out a lot over the years, probably more than any other single story. But actually, this is only one of many stories, because there are many realms around Harn, some with different politics. There's a kind of a quasi-Roman republic. There's a realm that's got two other realms that kind of claim it. There's one that's a bit of a theocracy. But coming back to Caldor, where that succession crisis is imminent, the story it's really quite detailed, and that's still at its highest level, as in like king and one notch down in the political kind of hierarchy. But also inside Caldor there's several castles, keeps, and cities, and within those cities are maps and all of the residents. Not all of them, of course, because you couldn't name every person, but maybe a good way to look at it is a selection, a representative selection. The city of Tashal is a decent example. It's in Caldor. It's like the capital. There's a whole book about it. It's included in that Caldor book, but you can also buy it separately. It's 70 pages just by itself. There are maps. There are details about the government, the aldermen, like the town council, right? They're all named. And so none of these people necessarily would ever inherently have a claim for the throne, but yet they are supporting somebody, and somebody's supporting them. And there's a whole web of loyalty and patronage. Also, again, that guild structure is a pretty useful overlayer. In Tashal, we will have told you with the maps and the key to the maps where the glass worker is, where the litigant is, that's like a lawyer, where you can go get like an apothecary, maybe to get a potion of some kind. And we defined all of that, and in the more recent editions expanded it so that the names of those people it used to kind of give the location and the name, and that was about it. Now there's like a biography about those people. Again, it didn't change what was said, just added more to the story. But it's like a very beautiful representative sampling of what this city looks like. And then we have another important design concept there for the story, that is, there are a lot of empty buildings. And they're empty. When I say empty, I don't mean empty in terms of who's in them. I mean, on the map, you have buildings, and some of the buildings have a number in them that corresponds to the key that tells you who lives there or who owns or runs that business or something like that.
The baker, John Smith, or whatever.
Precisely. Yeah. Yes. There's a whole bunch of other buildings that are undefined, that are just residences. It could be tenements full of people, could be townhouses belonging to such and such person, but we didn't necessarily define it. And that's left for the game master to have a little bit of creativity and room to fit things in as desired. And it's a nice compromise. It works really quite well. The maps, if you can't already tell from this map, are pretty special. And that's still true when you zoom in. So the local maps, city maps, local maps, interior plans, they're all very precise, detailed, and internally consistent. Again, I like to use that zoom in and zoom out when I'm when I'm telling people about Harn, if I'm giving the quote unquote elevator speech, I will use that to help illustrate it. Anyone who wants to head over to the Kickstarter that we have going, we just wrapped up Kingdom of Kanday in a hardcover, but it's still open. The page is still there, and you can actually, Kickstarter recently created a system where you can order after the fact. It's new.
Oh.
It's actually brand new that you can do it through Kickstarter. So it used to be there were third parties that you extended campaigns with pledge manager kind of stuff. It is now possible to back directly through Kickstarter.
So sort of like Indiegogo, where like, you know, the official campaign is finished, but yeah, because this is different. Like usually it's like some link off to, you know, wherever, whereas this, that I did not realize that.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as it was, and that's new. We're actually kind of one of the pioneers to test it out. And then, so folks can still go there and take a look. But scroll down for me, Brian, on the main page there, right where you are at. Just scroll down, and you get to the spot here, a little further down, where we'll have a map, and a little further. Yeah, right there. Okay,
right.
Starting right there. I got the map that was behind me, right in the picture. And the square highlighted in red, it's grid square E8. You know how on an atlas or a map,
right,
the coordinates are defined across the top and down, right? That's like how Harn is done. So that's grid square E8. And scroll down a little further, you'll see what that looks like. And so that's a map. You can buy that map, and it's every hex on the bigger map corresponds to a hex on that map, and then the arrows continue. You'll see that that's going to tell you what the city of Aliyah looks like, which is just right there. Yeah, the arrow pointing down, and there's the city. And that's what you call a player version of the map. It has no numbers on it, so you could kind of give that to a player maybe if you wanted to, and they wouldn't know who's where. But there is another version of it in all the products that's called the GM map with the numbers, and then we point at another arrow down to a particular building, and that's actually like a little neighborhood you're seeing there, right? The square, the lane, the buildings, that's what they look like. And if you look at it close enough, you'll see that it gets right down into the spot heights of the ceiling over your head. And
here's the barrels in the storeroom, or, you know, the benches around the tables. So
super detailed, and also constructed to be real. Like we actually thought about the engineering of it, right? The building would stand up. The walls are in the right places. When there are two floors, they're stacked on top of each other correctly. A lot of thought is put into this stuff, and it continues to be some of the best stuff out there. This lately we colorized them. The plans used to be all black and white, but now they're in color. They're even better. That key that is the final step of that, it kind of, the arrow points back up so that you can see the key and then realize that the key tells you.
The fact that like all of the doors, well, it's got a wood latch, a wood bar, an iron bar, iron bolt, lock, you know, mechanical, magical. I mean, like that is a lot of detail for a door.
And you can use it or you can not use it, right? But the answer is there if you need to tell it. Like if the player asks you, you have an answer, and you don't have to stumble and make it up. It's kind of already there. And then it's always a beautiful guide too. Like once you read a little bit this stuff, you kind of know. You can then invent your own stuff or whatever, and you know how to follow the pattern and make a believable place, that one that we haven't developed. That's another really amazing thing about the Harn community, is there is an incredibly vibrant group of writers and editors and authors and artists and people that release what has become known as fanon as opposed to canon, and there's a website that's third-party website called lithia.com. There are more than 1,000 free articles on there, and many of them are just as good as the stuff that we're doing, and super inventive, like really, really creative stuff. Sometimes there's an arc to it where things get released to the public on lithia.com and then eventually become official and published.
I was going to say, how often does it make the bridge from Lithia into the actual publication of Harn?
Kind of pretty often, in a sense. I mean, we can't keep up with the pace that the public puts together. Although we're getting faster and more efficient, and our team is growing a little bit. Our team of writers and people around the world. But we've always been open-minded about this topic. We've always shared the key, for example, like the map key is a file that you can go download, and then if you need, you can use it to make your own maps. And our styles and our fonts and things, they're not secret. They're shared so that people can have the ability to make it feel like it's with Harnick. That's an ancient one there. You're looking at something from a fanzine from 2002. And it's some pretty good stuff, actually. Other times it's more specific. Like you could search for a manor on there, and you would find a bunch of manors that you could then. Those are real manors in the sense that they exist, always have existed on Harn, but they were probably never mapped before, and it's always been there. We've always known that it was there, where it was, who held it, and how many acres it was. But now there's more, and it's a free. There's no conditions to get it. Just go download it, and it's awesome. It adds to the depth and the lore, and it's a beautiful thing. The vibrant community, very, very passionate people. See there, right on the right-hand side, that Kaldoric succession crisis is one person's interpretation of what happened in that crisis that I kind of spoke about. It actually defines how one group, one game master and his players played it out, and so you can read it for inspiration. You can try to kind of mimic it if you like. The sky's the limit, actually, on that stuff. But it's very, very broad. That below that on the right hand side, there's something called Friends, Followers, Foes, and Followers. That is a series that is very nice. It's like individual people that have been very well defined, and they're sort of representative. Like you can see that it's like a female mercenary cavalry officer with a crooked back. Like, okay, all right.
A little bit of detail there.
You need one of those? Well, we got one of those. And that's a series. I think it said that was episode 19 or
right.
But there's a lot of it, and it goes on and on and on. And some of that stuff ends up becoming official, and some of it doesn't. But it barely matters, to be frank. Right? It doesn't really.
Well, I mean, with the fact that the timeline is quote unquote fixed, meaning it's not going to advance forward.
Yeah.
You can put out as much fan content as you want because this is 737.
Yeah. Some people do that, although you'll find there isn't as much of that as you might first expect. Like there's a little bit of that storytelling going forward, but probably 90% of what's there is more geographical, filling in pieces.
No, I'm saying like a player could take it and it's like, well, that's not official. I'm like, well, this is in 737, so it's official for us,
right.
kind of a thing.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, there's a term we kind of coined a long time ago called P-Harn, P being personal. So your Harn, it's like your own iteration of Harn and what's happening there. But these and the FFF, Friends, Foes, Followers series, those are pretty darn close to official. The main writers are some of the writers who are also published. Most of them are drawn by the same artist, Richard Luschek, so they fit the style and stuff. And so folks who are just discovering this, you can go and you can download just oodles of stuff, and it'll probably impress you. You'll not have to spend a penny, and then you're probably going to want to come back and get some of the other stuff just to sort of fill in the gaps. But and start there. That's a beautiful book. That 40th.
It really is.
It's a limited edition, and I won't have it for that much longer, and we'll reprint it, but it won't be that collector's edition ever again. So
I would say it's nice thick paper. It's really good coloring. Is it just out of curiosity, where do you print? Do you print here in the States or out of China?
No, that's printed in China. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I mean, most people do. I was just curious.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be cost effective. We looked at it, of course, and printed it the way that we could keep it priced. Otherwise, it would cost twice as much.
Sure.
It's already a bit spendy, all this stuff. What you're paying for, aside from the physical qualities, is the art and the writing and the time. It's quite a lot goes into it, and just in order to keep everything moving forward and keep us fed, there has to be, of course, a profit involved in it all. And
of course,
so if to demonstrate it or get used to it, start with the free stuff, right, and then go from there. But we also are very proud of the stuff that we do. We have a money back guarantee on anything. Hardly ever gets invoked, but it's watertight guarantee. If it ain't for you, then send it back. We even apply that to our PDFs, and we take your word for it. If you don't want it and you want your money back, we'll give you your money back. It's not it just doesn't happen that often, for one thing, and it's just not that important. It's more important to have happy people, I think.
Very interesting perspective. So, but no, it's that's. I mean, not that I can return it for a refund, but I wouldn't want to. I mean, this is a great book. So,
it's a beautiful book. It looks great on the shelf. I think people are going to be still happy to have that 40 more years from now.
Absolutely. So, so real quick, do you want, so when I was asking about drilling down on the story, did you want to talk about the upcoming, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, the novel?
I can tell you a few things. We have more than once sort of attempted to have the great Harnick novel written, and there's been a few novels set in Harn. The next one I'm quite excited about. The author is Maxwell Drake. We just call him Drake, and he's somewhat well known. You can look him up and see that he's written some other stuff. And he's writing what's going to be called The Carnage of Kiraz. And in order to stick with the program here, the timeline thing, The Carnage of Kiraz is a historical novel. So
okay.
it's set in the past of Harn, and it fleshes out an event, the Carnage of Karaz, which was a battle, an issue that was some dwarves inhabiting a place called Karaz. It's a little bit like iconically like a Moria, like one of those mountain realms.
Okay.
So you to visualize it, that's a pretty decent visual. And you could find that one on our site if you want to pull that up. You'll find Karaz. The Carnage of a Karaz is an event that happened hundreds of years ago, where the dwarves lost their city. They went on a campaign and a battle, and orcs overran it and took over and slaughtered everybody. And it was ugly. And then the dwarves came back, found their city pretty much sacked, and they turned it into a tomb. They shut it down and closed it off. They also buried the guy who led the attack. They counterattacked and took him and buried him alive in this place with some of the orcs that were an honor guard. One, we don't say what exactly happened to him, but it probably wasn't a good day. So the Carnage of Karaz is a term for the event, and there's a book about it here. In the sense, this is a module, and there's 2 parts to it. Actually, it's longer than the second part. Was really new, like came out. In fact, I got to update the pictures. That's kind of lame. Those are the same pictures.
I was gonna say,
I'll fix that. Now you made me shy. I'm going to fix that like today, because there's some other artwork that's really cool. But it essentially just expands on the site, adding places that weren't detailed before. The original Karaz as a module was published in the 80s, and then redone in 2023 and updated and colorized and all that. And part 2 added to that literally this year. The novel that we're talking about is set here, and we'll tell the story more from a first-person point of view.
Okay.
Like a first level point of view. It's not first person, but it is a close-up story, and it does a couple things. It's a narrative with it's a really good story. The writing is great. It's very crisp and readable, exciting, and it also fleshes out more about the details, about the culture, about what's going on. And the writer has been consulting with our authors, having a great time of it. He's been very complimentary of the team. They're working well together, and it will also have Richard Lushek art in it. And I'm super excited about it for all those reasons. It's supposed to be ready this summer, like Gen Con. That's pretty darn soon, though.
Right.
So I wrote to him today, and we're trying to finalize our timeline to see if we can hit that.
Because then you've also got to get the editing passes done, et cetera, and get it to a publisher, get the physical copies for Gen Con.
Right. It's going to be tight, nip and tuck, but we just might make it, and we're sure going to try. It's exciting. I'm hoping that the novel will be accessible enough that it's not a prerequisite to be a fan of Harn to read it, because ideally it would act as an introduction to the whole thing for a bunch of people.
Sure.
who could discover Harn, and a certain amount of them would maybe want to go play there. We'll see if we pull that off. That's elusive in history, but it's the goal, and the author's really fantastic. He's got the right idea, the right passion, and a bit of a following in his own regard that I think will help us. So I'm really quite excited for that to come out. And I'm involved in the copy editing too. So I won't say too much more. The actual details of what happens are better just wait to read it. But the story is just sort of fleshing out a historical event that is already in the Harnick lore. And so for that reason, you if you know anything about Harn, you already know what happens. It's not a surprise about the outcome or anything.
Yeah, but it's different to have a narrative as opposed to like just a textbook entry.
Exactly.
So, yeah. No, that's super cool. I actually I normally gravitate more towards the science fiction side, but for some reason I actually like the idea of reading about a dwarven hold getting raided by orcs and destroyed. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably have it at Gen Con, and of course I'll share it with you, and we'll have a talk about it with in this format. This is lots of fun, and we're blessed to have the opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to the world, and it's amazing. The 2 hours just went by. It's a good thing. Gen Con is coming right up. I'm planning for that. I'm planning for some events to be played there, and we'll be, of course, marketing the Harn products, but also our board games. We'll have them there. We have a promotion going at Gen Con where you can get a free map, and also a free computer game. And that's another whole thing. We have computer games from our military games sold through the Steam platform. They're pretty great. Julius Caesar, Richard III are the two that are really ready for prime time, and we're marketing with this coupon that you get at Gen Con a free Steam game. And then promoting the board game as well, because it's an iteration of that. And viewers here are invited to pop on my website. You'll find some references to that Steam game, where you can find it on Steam. Julius Caesar and Richard III. They're really quite a step up from what you might first expect out of a small company. We've got proper animation and graphics and artificial intelligence, and it's multiplayer or AI, and yeah, there you go. It's pretty cool. So that's actually for sale now, but we are promoting it rather heavily at Gen Con.
Sure.
And I'm excited for that. It's coming right up, really. I mean, less than 2 months.
That's true. I was going to say Gen Con is it's, I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's June, not May.
Mm-hmm. June 6th, D-Day. Yeah.
So
it's going to be here before we know it. So we're talking about it today, making sure all the logistics, the hotels, and the stock to be there are there. And then that also led me to write to Max Drake to see how he's doing. He's also going to Comic-Con in San Diego, which is the week before. And I think he actually is hoping to debut it there. So we'll see if we can pull all that off. I'm making a point to stress that it's more important to get it right than to hurry it.
Sure.
So we'll whatever happens, happens. But coming right up, and super exciting. So we'll be there, and I hope some of you will come, and I hope some of you will say to me that you first saw me on Brian's show, and we'll commiserate or chuckle about it.
I was gonna say, I mean, that could go either way. So all right, so I mean, I've kept you 2 hours already. Is there anything else that we need to cover? I mean, obviously I am crashing, so we literally can't, but we could obviously keep going because I'm just fascinated by all of this. So
let's just sort of we'll tie it all together here, wrap it up, and just come back again and do it again. I'm going to have another Kickstarter not too long down the road, and I love running these while the Kickstarters are going. Even this post campaign that we looked at with Kanday is still running in my mind. So
right,
I think those are the kind of ideal times for us to do interviews and talk to people, because we have somewhere to point people at that's new and exciting, and so yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'll let that we'll save some of this for another time. A whole bunch of other games I haven't talked about, other exciting projects too, and frankly, like the main thing that we could talk about really forever is Harn. I just sort of scratched the surface there, right? With it might have sounded like a lot, but I didn't. We're just iceberg. Like, really, there's so much more that I could tell you about, and but also, encourage you to get out there and read some of it. Lithia.com free stuff is a very good way to dive in, and then of course our stuff, we sell it, the hardcover books and also PDFs directly from our site. It's on drive-through, it's on Amazon, and money back
are all down in the descriptions.
Let's go on down, folks. And I really do look forward to doing this again. As I mentioned at the top of this whole thing, I met Brian through a different podcast or interview show, and we connected naturally and decided to do his show too. And so I will say to anyone who's listening here that I'm available for other interviews with other people, and happy to see if that can kind of become a linear or a growth opportunity where we can help each other, right? Hopefully I can bring traffic to you, and you can bring some awareness to me, and it's a win-win. We're loving it.
Absolutely. I mean, first off, thank you. I mean, I realize I let you kind of just, run wild, talking about everything. But it was like literally I'm just sponging in all of this stuff, and it is, I promise I'll have more read before we get together next time.
Yeah, your marching orders are to just read over the HarnWorld a little bit and dig out that Wizard Kings. You can set up a little one map scenario. There's actually one in the rules there of a solitaire.
I had it set up, and then I had to take it anyway. I'm a disaster. That's really all there is to it. But I promise by the time we talk next, I will have it played. Actually, like the Julius Caesar on Steam, it's like, ooh, I could actually get that, use that to learn the rules, because I'm assuming it's more or less the same kind of rules. And then I can try out the in person and get other friends to play it. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. All those things.
Weird.
The computer game's great for that. And not only it goes other directions too, in the sense that Julius Caesar's mechanics are pretty much Wizard King's mechanics. So yeah, that's a good one. That's I've already admitted it. I don't know. Can I retract that now? I don't think
I
so.
mean, you can do anything you want over here, Matt or Grant. Sorry.
It's once it's out there, though. I mean, there it is. There's a picture. I can't do it. But that's okay. I'm happy. We connected very well, and it's a good conversation. I realize I do talk a lot once I get going, and you got some words in edgewise. But
No, again, please don't take that as a complaint. That was like there is so much, and I like, even in the other discussions that we've had. I mean, we kind of covered a lot of the same subjects, but I still got so much more out of it, and that's one of the things that, like for me, being on the outside of the creative process and being able to talk to creators and designers and see where the things come from and how they got started. Just hearing your backstory about you and your family and how all of that came together is, I get fascinated by those little details. So it was still great, even if I didn't say much tonight, but
I find that's not uncommon. I just got a lot of passion for what we do, and it kind of starts dripping out, and I can't hardly stop.
But that's what you need as as a business owner or a designer. Like actually, like we went to Dice Tower West back in March, and there was somebody there demonstrating a game that they had up on Kickstarter, and I thought it looked interesting, but we couldn't demo it that day. So my wife and I came back the next day, and the guy was sitting there at the table, and I'm like, I would like a demo. And he sat there, like, he literally, like the first day, he seemed a lot more energetic, but then the second day, he's like, yeah, okay, so you kind of like, you do this, and you kind of do that, and then that's how you play the game. And like literally, my wife and I walked away, and it's just like, we have no interest in that. Whereas Grant doesn't stop talking for 2 hours, and I'm just like, okay, wait, where am I? What book do I need? How do I do this? What's coming next? So trust me, your passion is fantastic, and I'm happy to have been a part of that. So anyways, there's my rant.
That's a good deal. I guess, like I said, I enjoyed it as well. It's a wonderful business and a hobby. I'm blessed with the opportunity for my whole life to do it. If you think about it in terms of actual business, I'm selling fun, and
yes,
that's a fun thing to sell, right? Because people actually want to do it. It's a nice feeling. Like we got happy people. Almost everybody's coming out of this with positive feelings, and they've been entertained and learned something. It's a nice combination, and so I'm happy, and I love to share it, because the other irony is we're still totally unknown. 50 years of doing this. I'm sure that most people who come across the show here for the first time will not have heard of Columbia Games or Harn or Block Games. And so that's growth opportunity. That's the way I look at it. And so everyone who sees this for the first time, please welcome. Come and check this stuff out. And then not only maybe buy something knowing you can return it. That's kind of a background point, but welcome in, and then welcome to the family, right? We're a family business, and the people that that play a lot like family too. In fact, I have been lucky enough to go around the world at different places and different conventions and stay with different people, and it's almost nothing cooler than when I get to go somewhere and stay with someone who is a gamer and it's like a mutual honor. I'm blessed to be invited into their home, and they're looking at it like an honor that I came. And so that's a win-win. And really, I welcome anyone out there who wants to join the family here to take a dive, and we'll welcome you in. And that dive will become a deep dive, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no kidding. There's absolutely a ton to dive into. So, all right. So on that note, Grant, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for giving me your time. Thank you for the books. Yes, folks, he did send me free copies of the books. So, but it's not a paid advertisement. It's still well, okay, I guess it would be. Anyways, I'm not saying it because he sent me a free book. I'm saying it because this is a great book. This is something that's worth digging into. So I have plans and ideas that we'll see.
We'll see. The best laid plans. Yes. All right,
Exactly.
Brian. We'll wrap it up
All
here.
right.
I'll chat with you for a minute offline, and we'll do it all again sometime.
Exactly. So, folks, make sure you hit the like button on the way out. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're new here, welcome. Otherwise, we will see you all next time as I hit the end button and it kind of